Monument Securities Chief Economist Stephen Lewis has said that there can be little wonder that the bailout finds little favor with Greek popular opinion. Lewis has also said that it must be obvious to Greek citizens that its terms pay scant regard to their future prosperity, which is being sacrificed in an increasingly forlorn hope of preserving a stable currency for the use of citizens in other member states. To find out more, I'm glad to say that Stephen Lewis joins us on the line now. Good afternoon, Mr. Lewis. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure.
Likewise, Mr. Lewis. And now, could you please explain what you mean by saying that Greek people's future prosperity is being sacrificed in hope of preserving a stable currency for the use of citizens in other member states?
The adjustment that is being imposed on the Greek economy is far too sudden. To reduce the deficit so sharply over such a short period of time is virtually impossible without destabilizing economic conditions. Certainly some adjustment in the balance of demand is necessary, but it would make more sense if it was spread over, say, 6 years rather than 3 years, and if structural reform were a larger element in the overall package. But it seems that the IMF and the EU are insisting on a much shorter timetable because they are concerned that if the Greek debt situation is left outstanding, then it will destabilize the euro and economies in the rest of the continent.
Now, in an interview with CNBC, you have said that the ones who are to blame for the chaos are internationalists who conned European nations into surrendering their sovereignty to the European project, which you call a delusion. Why is it a delusion?
It's a delusion because it can't work ultimately. Economies which have quite different characteristics have been yoked together under one monetary regime, and that is a regime which doesn't suit any of them. The policies of the ECB are much too tight for Greece and they're probably too slack for Germany. It would have been better if the countries of the EU had had much more flexibility to adapt to shocks such as were administered by the financial crisis 2 years ago. And I think that if they had had that flexibility, they would have had much better growth prospects today.
Now, Mr. Lewis, you have forecast that the riots and the violence will show no signs of abating in Greece so long as the globalists insist on forcing Greece into bondage by implementing the draconian terms of the EU IMF loan. Did or does the Greek government have another option?
The other option would be to apply to the EU authorities to leave the Eurozone. That would give Greece the option of a much lower exchange rate, which would make its goods far more competitive in world markets, and then growth in exports could help plug the gap in demand that will come about as public spending is cut back sharply. It would also be a good idea to restructure the debt because the debt burden at the moment is insupportable as it stands, and even the financial markets believe that it is insupportable and would regard a haircut on the debt as being a recognition of reality. So if that were to come about, then that would also mean that part of the budgetary adjustment which is necessary could come about through lower interest payments.
Now, when you're talking about the markets, I assume you are referring to rating agencies also.
Well, rating agencies nowadays tend to reflect the judgments of the market rather than to lead those judgments. So the markets at the moment are taking the view that Greek debt is not of the highest quality by any means, and the rating agencies have followed up that market judgment with cuts in their published ratings.
If you were asked your opinion on what the Greece should do in this situation, what would you advise them to do, Mr. Lewis?
I think that there should be some negotiations opened with the European authorities for at least a temporary suspension of Greece's membership of the Eurozone. And I think that there would be a sympathetic hearing given to that plea from other members of the zone, certainly from Germany, and that a period of flexibility in Greek policy, say over the next 10 years, might enable the Greek economy to restructure, and that would fit it better for life in the Eurozone in the decades to come.
Thank you so much for joining us on Athens International Radio.
A pleasure.
That was Monument Securities Chief Economist Stephen Lewis.